Good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today and welcome to another exciting session of Masters Speak. Now, last Wednesday, when we held this session, we had over 90,000 audience listening into a session with Alpesh Shah, MD and Managing Partner of BCG India. We all heard him talk about the revival playbook for companies in BFSI space. I must share with our audience that I'm truly humbled by the feedback that we've been receiving on these sessions. Many of you have asked us for recordings as well. So please do note and be informed that all the sessions that we have done over the course of last 2 months are available on our social pages, both on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. So please feel free at your time to go back and listen in to a session of your choice. We have a weekend coming through, so let's make it a learnful weekend as well. Follow us and stay updated on all our upcoming sessions as well. So today we have another interesting session for you from careers, which we spoke of a week and so before, to the future of businesses. Today we're going to talk about future of workplace. But before I introduce our guest speaker for today, here are some standard checks. I hope all of you who are listening in, watching us, are safe. Your families are safe. If yes, please like and please hit the like button that you see in front of you. If you can hear us loud and clear, please click the like button again. Now, our speaker would want to know which part of the country you're joining us. In the comment section, do let us know the city that you belong to, that you're joining us from. And lastly, if you have any comments, all your questions, please feel free to let it come to us through the comment section. Ask the questions that you want our speaker to respond to. Remember that two lucky questions for the day will be picked at the end of the session as lucky winners for gift vouchers that we have for you. So stay tuned, listen into this conversation, stay with us till the end. Make sure that you are participating in getting a shot at winning the lucky question prize over here today. Now, let me introduce our guest speaker for today, Rajashree. Rajashree is the Chief Marketing Officer of TCS. She leads the global team of marketing and communications at TCS. And before starting in this role from Feb 2020, Rajashree led the retail practice at TCS for 15 years, engaging with leading global retailers, driving their transformation and innovation program. So clearly, she is someone who can tell us a lot about how the workplace are transforming and what is it that she can see from the crystal ball gazing that she possibly would have for us today. Now, she was responsible for developing future ecosystem connectors, bringing together industry, academia, startups to collaborate on topics like future of stores. She also established the Retail Innovation Lab, which researches and experiments with new technology innovation in retail. Very much for joining us today, Rajashree. You've got a huge fan following. I'm sure everybody out there is waiting to listen to you. So, without much ado, over to you. And thank you very much for coming to the show.
Hi Rakesh, good morning to you and good morning to everyone who's joined. Thank you so much for the intro. I'm really thank you for the team for inviting me for this session. And I hope this is useful for everybody who's joined. So thank you so much. Are we good to start? Okay. So great. I want to share my views on what we see as the future of workspace in the current environment and the times to come. As I mentioned, I am a very proud custodian of the TCS brand, and I want to start by sharing with you some overview of TCS. All of you know TCS. You've had relatives and friends and family who are part of TCS, and I want to share some information. So we go to the next slide. So these are some data points on TCS. We are a global IT services provider, $22 billion in revenue, one of the largest IT service providers in the world. We operate in about 50 countries. We started our business in 1968, so nearly 52 years back. Probably, and I think we are the first multinational to come out of India. So we have operations in almost every corner of the world. Largest private sector employer, so 450,000 associates. Yes, we are very big. And a metric I'm really proud of, which is we have more than 35, 36% women. And I think it'll be safe to say that we are probably one of the largest women employers of India as well, and probably one of the largest ones in the world. Another metric that we are very proud of is we are one of the largest companies from market capitalization perspective. So $100 billion company, and we are in the league of some of the top companies in the world from an IT services perspective. Another important data point I want to share: the TCS brand, especially in the IT services world that we operate in, is the fastest growing brand in IT services. So we do a survey which is done by a company called Brand Finance. And in 2020, they rated us as the fastest growing IT services brand in India. So we are number 3 in the global number. So these are some really interesting, data points to share with you on who we are and where we stand today. If you go to the next slide. So I want you to remember a few things about TCS. All of you would think they know us, but if I can share some additional insights. The first thing which you should think about is transformation. In the 50 years that we have operated, we have transformed businesses, industries, countries, and really been a force for transforming, across the world. If you take India as an example, with the ION platform, we have completely transformed education, assessment, examinations. We have been part of many public service engagements like the, Ayushman Bharat, the Passport Seva. We run the financial backbone of many, many countries across the world. We work for leading retailers, pharmaceutical companies, and so on. And I think it'll be fair to say that we've been a transformation powerhouse, for all the 50 years that we've operated, something we are really, really proud of. The other thing which probably comes to our, probably is important to share, is that we are an innovation powerhouse as well. We have one of the largest R&D budgets of companies in India. We apply for a huge number of patents every year, and we have a very large portfolio of granted patents. And some of you might have read about the work that we have done, even with things like the COVID, discovery of medicine for COVID, which came out very recently in the press. So we have a huge innovation powerhouse. We have close to 500 scientists. We collaborate with almost every large academia, both in India and abroad. And we have this entire research and development ecosystem, which really powers our transformation agenda. The third thing which we are really proud about is our certainty tagline, or the certainty ethos. We get things done. We have delivered huge number of projects, huge number of engagements for our client, and we are a value player. We are somebody who companies and businesses and countries can absolutely depend on, right? So these are some things which we are really, really proud of, and I thought I'll share this with you briefly. Going to the next slide. So this is a very interesting picture. This is I work out of Chennai and Bombay interchangeably. This is a picture of our beautiful campus in Chennai. It's called the Siriseri campus. 100 acres. We have more than 40,000 people who work here every day. A gorgeous place. I have not visited this place since I think my last day when I went to office was March 10th. And we our whole life was about actually attending these, going to office and interacting, and the large canteens that we had, and the huge number of people that we would meet every day. So every TCSer today across the world has gone from this to, if I can go to the next slide, this, right? So today, more than 95% of our employees are working extremely safely, comfortably from the comfort of our homes. And we are continuing to deliver without any shortfall, all the commitments that we have made to our customers across the world. And I'm very proud to share that this has been an unbelievable journey, right? So literally under 2 weeks, we made this massive move. If you had probably asked us as well, a month back or a couple of months back, is it really possible? We would have probably said no, it can never happen. But this change really, sort of happened in literally under 10 days. And our clients have been so happy about, the change that has happened, and we've received a lot of positive accolades for client on our ability to keep businesses on, our ability to innovate with them. So, while it's important to keep these businesses on, what has been very critical is many of our customers who are leaders in their own businesses have had to make rapid changes to their business models to, really survive and thrive in this post-COVID world. So whether it is accelerating ventilator developments, accelerating drug deliveries, moving themselves to a remote working model, retailers have had to move into more digital means of operation. Bankers had to transform stock exchanges. So not only have we kept these businesses on, but we have co-innovated, co-transformed with them in helping them manage this entire crisis, right? So a very interesting journey that we have gone through, and we've obviously learned a lot from this journey as well. If you move to the next slide. So I probably identify this picture. This is a picture of the Himalayas being visible from Punjab. And we've all had these experiences, right? So we've seen our cities being cleaner, we've seen less crowd, we've seen better personal efficiencies, we've been able to spend more time with our family. Of course, there have been a lot of challenges, right? Setting up the infrastructure at home. How do we really work without meeting our colleagues? How do we replace the impact of physical interaction? From a marketing standpoint, we used to conduct almost 500 events every year. We've moved all of those events digital. So there have been a lot of changes and there have been a lot of challenges. But what we have understood is we are sort of liking this new world, right? So there are a lot of things which are better about this new world, and we probably think that we will not go back exactly to the world the way it was when we left it about a couple of months back, right? Next slide, please. So we believe that this is a moment for a new beginning. I know the word new normal has been used extensively in the last couple of months in a lot of publications that have come out, but we believe that this is a new beginning, right? So every crisis that the humanity has faced in the past, whether it is something like the Spanish flu or it's a war or any crisis that humanity has faced, I think is also a great opportunity for us to look at who we are, what are we doing to our planet, what are we doing to our world, and really use that to our advantage to create a new beginning. So I would say that, we are learning from these experiences. Of course, there are, several challenges, especially for a company of our size and scale. But we want to look at it positively, and we believe that this is a new beginning. So I want to show you a small video. Ashish, if you can play that video for us. So that was a video of our new campaign. We call it the new beginning, and I want to share some thoughts of what that is mean. As you can see in the video, we have declared our 25 by 25 vision. Ashish, if you can go to the next slide. So one thing which we have understood is that what does this new beginning mean, right? Every aspect of our life and the businesses which are associated with these aspects are all going to change, right? So if you take consumer buying, so we are talking about now a more contactless buying experience, right? So can we look at more digitally enabled buying experience? Health, I think, is going through a major transformation. I was reading, I was watching some articles about how the whole concept of telemedicine, which was absolutely not acceptable by regulators, and people did not know how do you actually pay a doctor who is advising you over a video con. All of these notions that we've had, that these things are really not possible, are very quickly transforming, right? So health, consumer experience across all the different industries. I think education, we've all seen that our kids are now able to study, wherever they are. We had already started to see a lot of digital employment in things like assessment, and a lot of online testing and so on and so forth. But again, education, I think, will go through a massive transformation. The point is that we are not saying that the old will go away, but we are saying that there is a new, and the new is going to be a mixture of the old and new. Even things like personal finance, right? Things, about how, will we go to a bank, will we go as often as we can? So all the aspects of our life is, sort of completely going to change. If you go to the next slide. uh, However, one thing is very clear, right? That one thing which will change a lot is work, right? How we work is going to go through a massive transformation. And I guess today's topic is all about sharing with you, how that entire transformation is going to happen. The other thing which is very clear, the next slide, is that a lot of this transformation will be powered by technology, right? While a lot of people have come and asked us that, is this really going to impact your business? But what we have seen in the last couple of months is that a lot of these transformations are going to be enabled by technology, right? Technology around the infrastructure, technology around collaboration platforms, technology around experiences, technology around recalibrating supply chains, data, algorithms. There is going to be a massive influx of technology that's going to happen, which is going to create, a completely new world and a new experience across all of these businesses, right? Go to next slide, please. So we, at TCS have embarked on this, great new beginning, and the video which we showed to you is really going to talk about this beginning. And if you go to the 25 by 25 slide. So this is what you saw in the video. I think there is a lot of curiosity to understand what is this 25 by 25 vision. So it's very simple. What we are essentially saying that a physical presence in an office is no longer 100% mandatory. Whether it is 25, whether it is 30, we're going to figure these things out as we move along. But the physicality of a presence of 9 hours or 10 hours in a physical space at a pre-designated physical space is going to no longer be mandatory for us to be 100% productive, right? So that is a very quick summary of what we are saying. We are not saying that everybody will be working from home, right? We are basically talking about remote working, which is that you will work where you are comfortable working from home. For many people, that place might be the office because you're most comfortable working in the office because you have the infrastructure, you have the collaboration platform. You still probably want to come to work. But if you look at how we talk about location in our day-to-day life, right? When we introduce ourselves. So I think when Rakesh started his presentation, he said, "Can you all tell us where you are from?" Right? So location, plays a very important role in our identity. We say we are from Chennai, we are from Bombay, we are from so and so place, and that is very true to work, right? So when even between ourselves and TCS, when we introduce ourselves, we say, "Oh, I'm Rajashree from TCS Chennai or TCS Mumbai or TCS Calcutta," right? And we place a lot of significance on the concept of location. And that really means that the entire ecosystem of transportation services, of course it becomes very difficult for people like myself who are women with children, to make that location happen. And it usually becomes a challenge for many people that they are not able to reach that point of location where where work is really happening. So we are really, the word I will use is, we are untethering location from work. And we are basically saying that work can happen where in any node of the ecosystem that is possible for the work to happen. But of course, we still have to meet, we still have to come together. So the offices will potentially get transformed into more collaboration spaces. Let's not say that we are always going to be at home. I'm, for example, really eager to go back to that beautiful office and meet my colleagues and have that cup of coffee with them. So this is the vision that we have declared, and there are things we've figured out, there are things we're figuring out as we go along. And I want to share, what we have learned so far, and what we think are some of the important aspects for businesses to understand as they look at this model. So the entire 25 by 25 vision has been empowered by a model that we have launched, called the Secure Borderless Workspace, or SPWS as we called it. Historically, if you look at the evolution of TCS, when we started our business 50 years back, we launched the offshoring model. For many of you who can you imagine what it must have been in a world where there was no internet? We went to companies across the world. We probably didn't have the whole infrastructure of transportation and all of that that's available to us today. And we told them, look, software could be developed, 10,000 miles away. So we've pioneered many of these models, and that's been kind of our our ethos and our culture. And we have now launched this model called the SPWS, which really is what is going to power the 25 by 25 vision. This is a model we've already implemented in our company, or we are in the process of implementation. But this is something which we can make available to businesses across the world as well. If you go to the next slide. So this means, right? So when we talk about this new way of working, or the new work order, everything has to change, right? So let's not kid ourselves and say that we can just exactly copy what we're doing right now and move it to this new world. So a lot of things have to change: the people, the processes, the infrastructure, the measurements, the learning, the social collaboration, right? Many aspects of the businesses have to change, and I'm going to talk about some of our learnings and what we think are going to be important from the future. Next slide, please. So this is really an interesting notion, right? So we've always heard songs like 9 to 5. We've talked about how a large population of our world gets up in the morning and goes to work, right? So there have been songs and books and poems written about the whole notion of people going to work, right? I think the notion that we are shifting is from uh, people going to work coming to people, right? So can this entire transformation really happen? And this is a I mean, you need to really think about these words very carefully about what does this really mean, what does this really mean to a business, right? So if you look at a doctor today, the doctor goes to a clinic uh, to look at clients, right? As opposed to that, the patients are now going to come to the doctor through a telemedicine exercise, right? Of course, you can never transform something like a barber or a spa. You'll always have to go to that place. But even we've seen that transformation happen in many places where the notion of people, the work coming to people is really becoming sort of very critical and important. If you go to the next slide. So what does this really mean, right? This is a very important concept where we are talking about democratization of talent, right? So today, where I am born or where I live really is a determinant of the opportunities that are available to me, right? If I'm living in a developed country, I get more opportunities. If I live in a city, I get more opportunities. If I'm born in a certain ecosystem, I get more opportunities, right? So the opportunity is not just about work, but the opportunity really starts with even something like education, right? You are in a good city, you have access to better schools, and therefore, the whole advantage of location really, starts from the time you are born. And we are now saying that there has to be a concept of democratization of talent, right? And we are talking about the concept of a human cloud, right? Now, when we people who understand technology on the call today, we talked about the creation of a cloud, right? So today this entire event is happening on a cloud. So we don't have servers and computers which are sitting and data which is sitting with people, and it is now all available on cloud. We are able to share pictures, we are able to share videos, we are able to have web conferences. Imagine if you could transport the same notion to cloud, a human cloud or a talent cloud, right? What does that look like, right? So if you look at, let's say, lawyers, or computer scientists, or coders, or developers, or doctors, or educationalists, or teachers, right? Can we really create a talent cloud, and can people who need to access that talent really have the ability to access it remotely as much as possible, or a mixture of physical digital experience, right? I think that is kind of what we are talking about here, and this is a very important I think tipping point in how we look at talent in the future. And I think the models that we are talking about here, powered by the concept of SPWS, is really going to accelerate the creation of the talent cloud. Next slide. This is very interesting, right? So a lot of people, women with small children, it's a topic which is very close to my heart. People with, physical challenges have always found the notion of going to work very, very difficult, right? I remember when the first day I went back to work, after my maternity leave, it was such a difficult process, right? I mean, the timing, getting your transportation, worrying about what's happening at home, trying to manage your baby's schedule, such huge challenges. And I think every mother here will tell you that, we miss the part about our child, coming back from school with the excitement. And we always wish that, can I not spend that 30 minutes with my child, right? Now, the concept of location has actually kept a large part of this workforce out, and we strongly believe that models like this, it might not apply in the way it's applying to our company, it might apply differently to different companies, will basically encourage latent workforce to come back and work. And I think this is a huge opportunity for businesses, because there are a lot of talented people who are available out there, and there is always a talent shortage in most of the large companies. And I think this entire inclusion of talent workforce, latent talent workforce, I think is going to be a huge advantage for our business, right? So I'm really, I would say, emotionally attached to the concept that we now have sources of latent talent for our businesses. Next slide. The other thing is, of course, we have borders, right? So we have, country borders, state borders, all sorts of borders that we've created. And I think a concept like this will really open up innovation, right? Innovation, as we have seen in our business, always happens in ecosystems. Innovation can never happen in isolation. And that's why, things like crowdsourcing models, conducting hackathons, or worldwide, I mean, we don't know where the next vaccine is going to get developed, right? So as you've seen, a large number of collaboration programs that have come up. We know for sure that collaboration, innovation really happens powered by collaboration. So models like this, again, I think will really accelerate collaboration, accelerate development for our human race, which again I think is a huge advantage for our business. Next slide. Uh, Again, I think this is related to some of the earlier points, but we believe that there will be better efficiency, there will be better leverage of human ingenuity. People living in Bombay will tell you that they probably spend 4 hours traveling, 3 hours traveling. if we can conserve some of that time, we are again not saying that we are going to completely stop going to work, but if we can conserve some of that time, if we can, probably go to work 3 times a day, or 3 times a week, or 2 times a week, we are now suddenly finding that there is a lot of time and there is better leverage of human ingenuity, right? All of us today, spend a large part of our time working, but most of us have other talents, right? People can sing, people can paint, people want to spend time with charities, people want to, look at a lot of other talents, they want to probably spend time with families. So this model, or these models, right, really, we believe, can really open up efficiency and, really create human ingenuity. So can we actually get more amateur musicians or amateur artists, because now they have that extra couple of hours that they can spend? Can we see explosion of more books or more poems, right? I'm sure everybody knows that there is a hidden singer among you or a hidden poet among you. So models like this is really going to open up human ingenuity, which I think is again a great opportunity for the human race. Next slide. I think this is a great thing. We've already experienced it. In fact, when I am seeing the traffic on the streets, I'm like, oh my god, why are we seeing this crowd, why are we seeing this noise, and why are we seeing this pollution, right? So yesterday we had some beautiful clouds, on my terrace, and I think, this model will put less pressure on our business, less pressure on our planet. And what can be a greater reason for us to do it, right? I mean, what can be a better reason for us to do it than to protect our planet in any which way that we can, right? So I think a great outcome of a model like the SPWS model. Can you go to the next slide? However, what we have learned in the last 2 months is that there have to be a lot of changes that we've made. At TCS, we have made a lot of those changes, but we are still, I would say, in an early stage, in a beta stage. And we are discovering newer things about, what will happen to collaboration, what will happen to people management, what will happen to talent, what will happen to work practices, what will happen to security, what will happen to infrastructure, how will the process of mentoring that will happen. So we are really at the, I would say, still at the starting point. We probably are slightly ahead of other businesses who are even thinking about it right now. But we know for sure that, not everything has been figured out, and we have to make a lot of changes, to our business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we need to make and we need to consider when we look at our new work model. Next slide. So every industry will adopt it differently, right? So we cannot say that somebody who's in manufacturing will suddenly start working remotely. It's not going to happen, right? Now, if you're in research and you have to actually do lab experiments, you can't obviously sit that do it remotely, right? So every industry need to think about what the new work order looks like and adopt it and adjust it to the way their industry operates, right? I mean, even something like airline that we're discovering, or hotels, are all going to change in the way they are going to operate in the future, right? So there is no one size fits all. What works for TCS will not work for a bank or even Future Generali, for example. So every industry, every business, every nation will have to adopt this model. But there are a few, I would say, key considerations that we need to look at. If you go to the next slide. So this is a very interesting concept, right? I learned a word called skeuomorphism recently, and the concept of a skeuomorphism is that, let's say, you've designed a vase or a picture, or a created an object, and the object, let's say, is made of clay, and you then draw certain design on that clay object, right? And let's say now you want to design that same vase, a flower vase, in metal, and we are trying to transfer the same design to the metal, right? It may or may not work. And I think the way to look at our future workplace is not to essentially replicate what we do today digitally, right? If I take the example of events, for example, right now when we do events, we have networking, we have coffee breaks, we have lunch breaks. We our events go on for 1 day, 2 day. When we do a digital event, there is no way we can exactly replicate that into a digital format, right? I mean, in fact, a couple of days back, I attended an event where they gave us a lunch break, and I was like, okay, why do I need a lunch break when I'm attending a digital event, right? I can just go and grab my food and eat it, right? So this is very critical, which is it's very critical to understand that what this concept is not about taking a physical model and exactly replicating it into the digital model, but we have to design this digital model upfront, and we need to think about what works, what doesn't work, everything from your leave policy to your supervision to monitoring, to talent management to collaboration, right? Every single process has to be redesigned, and that is something we are discovering literally on a daily basis in our company. For example, we used to conduct large town halls, we used to have a lot of collaboration. We launched something called a One TCS platform at the beginning of this event, and the beginning of this whole pandemic, and we now are conducting a lot of digital events. We are encouraging collaboration, we are conducting remote birthday parties. I'm sure a lot of these things are being done in other companies as well. But it's very important to understand that you can't just take a model which has worked for hundreds of years in a physical model and exactly replicate into a digital model, and we have to redesign the processes or freshly design the processes for the new beginning, right? Next slide. This is again very critical, right? So there is this concept called ambient awareness. What does ambient awareness mean, right? Ambient awareness means that when you're in a physical space, when you're in an office, you hear a lot of things, right? You hear people talking, you see a lot of things. You go for lunch and you meet other colleagues. You find out what else is happening in the company. We all gossip, right? We hear about we hear, oh, that guy is leaving, that guy is joined, that we think that is happening, that org change is happening. So there is a lot of ambient awareness, right? And what is very critical to understand is that this ambient awareness, you don't go and find it comes to you, right? Just by being in a cafeteria, all this information is coming to you, and this information is defining your work. It's defining how you do, defining your next steps, right? I mean, you hear, oh, okay, maybe an org change is coming, and then you start thinking about, what should I do? How should I respond to this change which is happening in the company? Or let's say the company is making a new acquisition, or we hear about a new service line that's being launched, right? What's really important for us to understand is how do you translate this ambient awareness in this remote working environment, right? Now, most companies have portals, right? We all are very proud of our portals, and we put out a lot of information on the portals. We send out emails, right? Now that might not work, right? Because a notion of a portal is that you are expecting that person to log in, put an authorization code to go and seek information, right? And that's not how ambient awareness works. We have to find methods, techniques, and all of this will be technologically enabled, right? How do you make this ambient awareness be available to your associates? And so at TCS, we are putting, for example, a lot of utilities on our systems where we can send out notifications. And again, remember, these are not rule notifications, right? These are information. These are interesting things which are happening in the company. So we are experimenting with a lot of these things. In fact, interestingly, we have started to use some of the social media platforms for internal comms, right? We know a lot of our associates are available on social media platforms. So we are now starting to explore. We know a person probably goes to a Facebook a lot more than they go to our internal platforms. So can we use those platforms to actually create this ambient awareness for our company, for our associates, right? So I think a lot of these things have to be thought through, and these are not HR topics. These are topics which everybody in the company needs to think about: teams, companies, leadership, organizations, and so on. Can we go to the next slide? This is critical. We believe that the future world is not going to be a human only world. I think a lot of conversation has happened in the industry about adoption of automation. Again, if we think that 100% of the work that's happening physically will be done 100% remotely, is not going to work, right? So we have to think about, as businesses, as individuals, as to what aspects of our work can be machine led or can be automated, right? One of our reasons for why we were able to enable SPWS and TCS is that we had what we call a machine led philosophy, right? We were on this journey for last 3 years, where we were looking at processes, practices within the company, and we were adopting algorithms and machines to automate those processes, or to allow the machines to run those processes. I believe that the reason we could pivot to this model so quickly and so confidently is because of the investment that we had made in the last 3 years to adopt automation in the company, or to adopt machines in the company in a very humanized way, right? I think this is something which companies really need to think about. In fact, my personal opinion would be that companies who had higher degree of machine adoption have done better to handle the pandemic than companies who were human only, right? There are multiple examples of this, right? So, for example, even things like how do you close books, how do you do appraisal processes, how do you do how do you manage work practices, how do you measure productivity in the company. There are so many processes where machines can do a better job, and we need to think about machines as an important part of the workforce. So the future workforce is not a human only workforce, it's a human plus machine workforce, and we need to think about synergies. Of course, there are a lot of areas of conflicts, but we need to think about synergies, and we need to think about how machines can very seamlessly integrate with our workforce. So to me, this has been a very important part, and I, as I mentioned, very strongly believe that the reason TCS can be ambitious about this program is because we have adopted automation and machines in a big way in our organization in the last 3 to 4 years. Go to the next slide. I think we spoke about it. I actually wrote a blog about it on LinkedIn as well. I think this notion of social distancing is not really right, right? I think what we have done today is the concept of physical distance. So we are physically distant from each other, but I personally feel that we are probably more socially closer. I'm calling my friends more often. I'm reaching out to my social group a lot more than I used to do before, maybe because I have more time, or it's more easy for me to do it. So I think while models like this will create social physical distances, it's very important to understand that it does not mean that we are creating more social distances, right? So, for example, if I had to come and speak to all of you, it could have never ever happened, right? I mean, I can see that people are logging in from God knows all sorts of different places, and it would have been impossible for me to actually physically even talk to all of you or get to know all of you. But look how beautifully this model has actually enabled us to get together, right? So I think while there is physical distance, but we have to think about how do we still encourage social distance, and it has to be a systematic program. In TCS, our internal communication teams, our HR teams have really made a very, very strong effort. I can tell you personally, I've spent more time in the last 2 months in thinking about internal communications than I have over thinking about external communications, right? We've done so much to make sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we launched this entire concept of one TCS, right? So we are running together, we are attending events together. We hosted a town hall where 30,000 people logged in. They had never seen so many leaders so easily accessible, laughing, smiling. In the One TCS platform, we encouraged a lot of people to come and present. So we've had people like Vishnath and Anand, John T. Rhodes. We had Ron Garren, who's an astronaut. We've had musicians come and perform. And I personally think that these last 2 months have actually brought our company together more closely, because our access has become easier. We are collaborating like crazy on our platforms. We've beaten every metric that's there available. And I think that is really the model for the future, right? So nothing can replace that physical connect. I'm actually longing to go and talk to somebody physically. But I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of enabling social connections. I think the last chart, next slide. So measurement, right? If you look at the workplaces in the future, we have this concept of a supervisor, right? Somebody who's overlooking you. And when we go late to the office, we are like, oh my God, I hope my boss has not seen me, right? And I think this concept, right? And again, I want to say this not just in terms of companies, but time is always the measure, right? So even when we are young, our parents used to measure it in terms of how much time we used to study, not whether we focused on it or got good marks, but they used to say, oh, she was awake till 2 o'clock studying. And even if you look at our workspaces, we always say, that person is really great because they're spending 10 hours in the office, or they're working very hard. They're coming on the weekend. Coming on the weekend was considered a great virtue, whether that is important or that is even valuable or not, right? And this whole concept of a supervisor, somebody overseeing you, was is still, I think, a very, very important concept, right? So I think a lot of these notions have to change, and we have to focus on trust. We have to focus on self governance, and we have to focus on results, right? And I think it starts from how we are brought up as children. Are we going to stand behind our children and see, okay, is that person studying, or are we going to come up with new models about how we trust our the people around us? So I think it's a huge area of opportunity. I think we've not figured any of this out at all. But I think it's something for all of you to think about and ponder. But please, next time, don't say that that person is a great employee because he comes on a weekend or spends 12 hours in the office. I think, at least if not anything else, let's not measure a person based on that parameter, because I think it is just something which a lot of people cannot keep up with, right? So I think the last chart. So I think I shared with you our journey. I shared with you our thoughts. Ashish, the last slide. So we shared our vision with you, why we think this is important. As I mentioned, we are still in what we call an MVP, or a minimum viable product. We are discovering a lot of things every day, but I'm really proud about how my company has responded, how our associates have responded, how our customers have responded, how all our stakeholders have responded. I'm really thankful. I'm sure there are a lot of TCSers online today as well. So big thanks to everybody who has helped us in the journey. We are very optimistic about the future, optimistic about workforces in the future. And any of you who run businesses on this call, if you need our help, our understanding of our journey, please contact us. You can go to our website. We have a page on SPWS. You can mail us. You can mail us on our social media handles, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. And we will be very, very happy to connect with you and share our learnings. And as we develop this model, I'm sure we're going to do things very fast. We'll be very, very happy to share our thoughts and our learnings. So that's a quick overview of what we have done. I think we have lots of questions, so I'm happy to take questions. Back to you, Rakesh and Ashish.
Thank you, Rajashree. It
Thanks.
was a lovely session, very interesting, and a visual presentation on future of workplace. I mean, a lot of slides out there that sort of leave a mark on me, and I'm sure that must be the same for our audience as well. One in particular I really liked was the valedictory slide, the graduation ceremony
Yeah.
taking place in the
Yes.
robot. That just sums it up, many things for us. I think it's lovely presentation. Thank you so much, Rajvi,
Thank you.
uh, for sharing your views so openly with us, and great work being done by TCS, as always. Now, it's also amazing to see that we've got so many people joining from different parts of the country, Nagpur, Jamshedpur, Chennai, Mumbai, so on and so forth. But we also have audience from different parts of the world. So we've got people from London, Budapest, Colombo, Johannesburg, Gloucester. I think that's credit to the greatness of TCS, as you rightly mentioned. It's a
Yep.
multinational out of India, and I think that's a matter of pride for all of us, Rajshri here.
Thank you.
Now, Rajshri, I must share that many of our speakers on the show before have quoted your company's decision of 25 by 25
Yeah.
as a big proof point of change that will come in future for workplaces. And a
Sure.
couple of back we had a very interesting conversation with Rama Bijapurkar. She had a very interesting perspective on this whole work from home situation. Her point, as I understood, was that a lot of people yearn for social bonding at workplaces,
Yeah.
the infrastructure, the physical interaction with colleagues, amongst many things. It
Yeah.
sort of acts as a release for many who don't have the luxury of space at home, and therefore, for many, walking away from home for work perhaps is more valuable.
Yeah.
So, questions, and I've got these questions from audience as well. So I'm going to juxtapose some of those questions and ask you.
Sure.
Um, Let me just put it in three separate questions, Rajshri, with your
Yeah.
permission.
Sure.
So one is, before taking such a massive decision, as a, it's a truly remarkable decision. How did you involve your employees in such a decision process? That's the first question.
Sure.
Second question also is from Deepika G, and her question is that TCS is planning to move a significant portion of his workforce to work from home, and will that not impact their ability to imbibe the organization culture and
Yeah.
values? Because physical space is a big part of culture as well.
Yeah.
And third is, how do you plan to equip your employees in a way to ensure that the productivity and motivation remains high
Yeah.
when they're from home?
Sure. I think I want to clarify a few things, right? So one is it's not a mandate. It is I would call it a more cultural shift. So we are not saying that you should not come to office 75% of the time, or 75% of the people should not come to office. We are not planning to like shut down our offices and stuff like that. But we are saying that the option should be with you, right? And if you ask me, as I mentioned, I'm dying to go to office right now. I'm just bored of sitting at home. So we are not saying that we should not go to work. We are only saying that your going to office should be dictated by what you want to do and how you want to manage your work, right? So we are definitely not saying that this is replacing an old model. We in fact believe that the I mean the whole concept of the culture, definitely, we are social animals, right? So talking to people, meeting clients, meeting our associates is a very important part of our culture. But what we are all we're just saying that it's not a rule anymore, right? I mean, we don't do it
Mhm.
at TCS, but we know a lot of companies measure timesheets, and they mandate 9 hours working in the office, and it's very difficult for everybody to get to that model, right? I mean, even I know a lot of people pick jobs based on where that office is located in a city, right? So people in Electronic City in Bombay, Bangalore will not go to Whitefield and seek a job, right? So isn't that creating what I would call, inefficiencies in our system, right? So all we are saying is that make it an option. We are never going to go away from a model where collaboration does not happen. But as you can see, a lot of things I talked about is about mindset shift. And I always, when I had a young child, I used to always hate when somebody used to say, "Ki that person is working very hard because he's coming on a weekend," right? And that cannot be a measure of our efficiency as an employee. To me, that strikes me, and I think what we are doing is what I would call a cultural shift. And of course, we are backing it up with a lot of technology shift, infrastructure shift. But it's not a mandate. If 100% of people want to come to work, they're happy to come to work. But yes, can we improve our efficiency? And what we understood, and why we stated this as a vision and not as a mandate, I mean, clearly it's not a mandate, is because we found there were a lot of advantages of this model, right? There were a lot of things which were working out better in this model, and we've all discovered that, right? I mean, I used to travel extensively. I used to make at least 15, 16 international trips every year. Jet lag, health, travel, visas. I'm so happy to be doing an event where I don't have to go through all of that, right? Of course, I'm not saying I'm going to do 100% of those events. I will travel, but not maybe 15 times a year. I'll probably do it 4 times a year, right? So I think it's all about that. I mean, it's a cultural shift, and but there's a lot of things we have to do to enable collaboration, and we're not replacing that physical intimacy at all. Make sense?
Right. But your 2 cents on this whole aspect of culture, Rajshri, what is it? So while we get the message, and I think it's pretty reasonable that the idea is not to say that nobody will come to office, but
Yes.
just come to office. I think, but still, a lot of people will be working from home. So how do you really, uh, what measures as an organization are you taking, to ensure that this whole culture piece that Deepika spoke about, that
Yeah.
remains. You don't see that as something to really worry
Yeah.
about.
I mean, that has been, I would say, my number one, my personal number one, I would say, goal or challenge, whichever word you want to use, in the last 2 months, right? Because, a lot of our culture transmission happens very tacitly, right? We just meet each other, we observe each other, and the culture transmission happens very tacitly. And as I mentioned, from a marketing perspective, our entire focus of the last 2 months really, I would say, shifted big time on internal communications, and we of course continue to communicate externally. But it became extremely important for me to think about how are we really going to communicate with our associates, right? And this whole notion that you don't start sending commandments, right? So you don't say this rule, that policy, this policy, but how do you really, create a sense of pride, create a sense of belonging, transmit values, create friendliness. So we've launched a lot of things, and I still think this is really very early stages right now. But I talked about the One TCS channel. If you go and look up our blog post or our post by our associates on any of the social media channel, you will find everybody hashtagging One TCS, right? So we connected together on that concept of One TCS. We conducted a lot of events that are happening at team level, events which are happening globally. We, in fact, for one of our colleagues, a few weeks back, we did a fancy dress birthday party, right? So we all dressed up in fancy dress and we came. A lot of, I would say, much higher level of executive communication, right? We've had huge number of town halls. Earlier town hall used to be a big event. We used to set up the stage. You would understand that, right? So a town hall used to be a major activity. You would get people, you would rehearse questions. Now town halls can happen anytime. We have a very powerful collaboration platform where we can set up meetings and interactions very, very quickly. So I think the accessibility to leadership team, accessibility to each other, has significantly gone up in the last 2 months. And I think I personally feel as connected as I felt, in the physical world as well to associates. But I think we've not completely figured it out, and every day we are trying to figure this out more and more. I think the concept that I talked about, the ambient awareness concept, right? How do we push information? So today we have something called the Ultimatics app, which is something which every TCS employee has on their phone. We use that very actively to communicate to them, right? So even when we were telling people that don't come to work, and we were communicating a lot of things to them during that whole pandemic period. We continue to do that. So I mean, we are using, as you say, every uh, I wouldn't say weapon, but every playbook that we can to make sure the transmission happens. But of course, when we go back to offices, the role of the physical interaction it continues to be very important. But we are probably, the word I've been using very effectively is physical digital, right? So how do you really mesh physical digital? Like if you look at shopping, you go online and then go to the store. So it's probably very similar to that, right? So your workplaces will also be physical digital experiences. So we've done a lot. It's been a big personal focus for me, but I think we have lots more to do.
Very well said, Rashmi, and I couldn't agree more. We are experiencing the same in our
I'm sure.
organization. In the point that you just mentioned, somehow we feel that now because of the digital interaction, and there is no possibly those physical town halls was such a
Yeah,
big challenge. We're actually seeing employees seeking information through those platforms,
exactly.
and
Mm,
you are getting a direct feedback as well
yeah.
from them, which is quite a great outcome.
Yes.
Ajit, your question on culture, which was similar to Deepika, that gets answered. Thank you so much for your question, Ajit Joshi. Rajshri, on a slightly different point, but you sort of alluded to that question from Sayan is that do you see reverse migration of IT professionals, or for that matter, any professional, to tier two and tier three city? And I think it's
Yeah.
interesting what's what's happening. All this while, we've been facing a situation that people from tier 2, 3, 4 cities have been moving to metros and bigger cities in search of
Yeah.
employment. If I can use the word, sort of brain drain happening. But
Yeah.
today, you have a sort of a situation that you can actually have best of both the worlds. So you have a quality
Yeah.
of life in your city, which is less
Yeah.
polluted, less hassle.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
also get access to cutting edge,
Yeah.
work that you can.
I mean, I don't. We've not seen it happening as yet because we are all still stuck at home. But I think I spoke about the whole inequality in opportunities, right? So equitable opportunities, which really begins from when you're a child, right? And I quote this quote of one of my favorite singers, Bono, when he says that where you live should not dictate how you live, right? So I think I personally feel models like this will open up opportunities. It is very prevalent in countries like US, or you see other countries where people actually live in remote places and they manage to work. I mean, they probably travel to work every day because their countries are smaller, but they do manage to do a big part of their work from their home or from remote locations, right? So I don't know how this is going to pan out. So will we, for example, see the concept of more satellite offices, right? So today, when I showed you that beautiful building, 40,000 people are coming into that building every day. Will we start seeing, let's say, a TCS office in every suburb of Mumbai, for example, right? I mean, again, do not read this model as a model for work from home. We are not saying that everybody is going to sit at home. We are saying that you're going to be remote, right? Which is a very different concept. So will we see, for example, more satellite offices coming up, in the future? Not just for companies like us, but any companies, right? So even if you're running, for example, a physical laboratory setup, will we see smaller and smaller laboratories which are coming up in, yes, smaller towns, smaller cities, smaller places, and so on? Of course, a lot of it will depend on the connectivity, especially in a country like ours, which we still see as challenges, right? We find that in tier two, tier three cities, the connectivity is still an issue, but I think the paradigm will change. Now, how it will change, we are still trying to figure it out. But I think this notion of, building this gigantic physical structures, which houses thousands of people, every company has done it. It's not just TCS. Every technology company, every businesses have done it. And these have become showcase locations, right? I think a lot of this will undergo change. And I actually feel that it might not become work from home, but I feel a notion of a satellite office or smaller locations, right? And I would not even call them an office. I would call them a collaboration center. So when I want to meet another TCSer, I have a location which is a couple of kilometers from where I live, where I can go, I can meet, I can talk to other people. Probably changes in that location. I'm just guessing right now, and we'll have to figure some of these things out. But maybe we do anticipate some of those changes happening.
Very interesting that, Rajshri. I mean, if I had access to an office like the one we saw in your presentation, I would rather say live from work rather than work from home.
Yes,
Many of
you
us
bet.
will agree.
But it takes 1 hour to get there. That's the only challenge.
Might as well live there then.
Yes.
Everything possible there on the campus. No, that's very interesting. I think you made some very interesting points, Rajshri. It's not really work from home, but work remote, offices as collaboration centers. I think it's very, very interesting, and it brings a very interesting perspective because everybody's been thinking of work from home. Kids running around and all this chaos in the house, and you still have to
Yeah.
work, but what it
Yeah.
means. So,
I mean, a
absolutely. So,
working a working woman like myself, we want to go to work because it's
yes.
been quite tough to sort of manage all work in this chaos. So it's not that at all. But when I have an option, I want to take that option, right? So it's about giving that option.
Absolutely. Some of us have picked up cooking skills as well, actually, over here.
Yes. Yes.
That, that's just a positive fallout, I guess. But Rajshri, interestingly, I think this must be something that a lot of our audience may want to know. When working from remote locations or working from home as well, it makes complete sense from organization perspective,
Yeah.
even from economic sense, right? So, do you see if this becomes a sort of a way to go? Do you see this will also lead to compensation adjustments because now, since organizations will be able to save that cost
Yeah.
and people are not those costs living in those cities. So something like that will also happen. That's also a science
Um,
question.
Yeah, we are actually seeing. I mean, we have not had any of those conversations within our company, but I have seen some examples of other companies, especially in US, a couple of companies, where they have offices in very high price location like California, have actually gone and said that, look, if you're not going to come to this location, then don't expect California salaries, right? So we've started to see some of those notions, and also maybe, as we would do in other businesses, when you save cost, you transfer some of that cost to another bucket. So really no conversations that I have seen in the company around some of these concepts, but I think eventually, the adjustment of the commercial model, or the cost model, will also happen. How, I think it's really early days. I don't see that conversation happening in 2020 for sure, because we have to still survive this year, and this has been a super crazy year so far. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those concepts will start to appear, and it will start to come to bear. And I definitely see conversations happening around that, but definitely not in 2020.
Right. There's a question from Amrita, and my request to audience: please keep your questions coming. Thank you very much for your questions. Um, I will filter through those questions and ask Rajshri today on our show. So Amrita wants to know, for marketing and sales professionals, there's a paradigm shift, especially the ones who were relying on face-to-face
Yeah.
interaction and relationship building meetings and so on and so forth. How do you think things will pan out for them, given that this social distancing and traveling less will be the norm?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I've discovered, at least in the last 3 months, is that there is going to be a 360-degree change in the way we interact with our customers, right? So, uh, we are, again, as we said, the first thing, we at least in TCS relied very, very heavily on physical events, and about all our sports sponsorship platforms. We sponsor New York Marathon, we sponsor Mumbai Marathon, so we have all of these extremely physical events, if I could call it. You can't get an event more physical than a marathon. So we've obviously had to recalibrate. Again, we've probably not reached our end state, but I would use the word engagement, right? So all these platforms that we had, or all these marketing events that we did, right? It's all about engagement with our customers and engagement with our stakeholders. Now, the question is, how do we replicate that same engagement levels in a digital format, on a digital physical format, right? Again, what's been very interesting for us is, we went with this entire philosophy that don't take something which is physical and replicate it into a digital format, right? So when we, for example, did our first press conference, as you know, our results are very heavily awaited in India. We had to do it in a completely remote fashion, right? So we had to recalibrate that event, right? What happens? Who speaks first? What platforms do we use? How do we still provide the interaction that the journalists seek as part of that process? We yesterday conducted our first global innovation forum. I think it was day before yesterday. It used to be like a mega event where, we used to have New York, Chicago, Sao Paulo, and all of that stuff. And we did it completely in a virtual fashion. So how do you still ensure the same production quality? For example, you still, you don't want to see person sitting the way I'm sitting right now with a phone. You still want to see a stage, you want to see the drama, you want to see the music, and you want to interact, right? I mean, you call all these great customers, and then you can't even talk to them, right? So we are constantly trying to rediscover these experiences, right? And how do we maintain our engagement levels with our stakeholders, with our customers? And I think this, again, like workplace, I feel the sales and marketing process will also undergo a tremendous transformation. Maybe a topic for another day, but I see there a huge opportunity for improvement and complete 360-degree thinking as far as that is concerned.
Thank you, Rajshri. Nitin Goyal, Rajshri has already answered this question, so I'm sure you've got your answer. There is a bit of a delay in the time you ask a question and we post it, but I'm just making sure that your questions are answered. So she's already commented on your question as work from home as cost saving model. Rajshri, another question that we have is, you've been working with clients across the globe, for long. earlier in our sessions, we had a lot of questions on future of retail in India. So this is moving away slightly from future of workplace.
Yeah,
Now, again the social distancing norms, safety protocol requirements. Are
yeah.
we heading towards large scale disruption in the way traditional retail business model operated? So is it like beginning of the end of physical retail setup, and is online something which will rule the roost
Yeah.
in the coming year?
Yeah, I think, interesting question takes me back to my retail days. But, we had already started to see a major disruption in the retail business for the last, 4 to 5 years. And we had seen a significant adoption of retail, the digital retail, uh, in many businesses, right? So many of our clients today operate, they get about 25-30% of their revenues from online. And what has always fascinated us was the online offline interaction. So that concept is very much valid to workspaces as it is valid to shopping. So it is not about digital replacing physical or physical replacing digital, right? It is about both of them working extremely synergistically to provide an end-to-end experience of to consumers, right? Many businesses have done a very good job of it, right? I mean, we work with people like Best Buy, Home Depot, many of these great retailers who've done a very beautiful job of orchestrating that journey, right? I think so. I feel that in many retail businesses, including some of the businesses in India, these are viewed as two separate channels, right? Even if you look at our workforce conversation today, we talked about remote replacing office. It's never going to be like that, right? It is about a holistic physical digital journey. Uh, in that journey, in the last 2 months, we have seen a further acceleration of digital, right? So there are more aspects which are getting transmitted into physical, right? So, for example, we've seen the use of AR, VR. We've been talking about artificial augmented reality and virtual reality for a long time in retail. It always remained in innovation labs and it remained in corners of the business. It never became mainstream. But now, just in the last 1 month, we've seen a large number of retailers who've set up virtual shopping environments where you can actually see a store, and you can actually see the products. You can probably even pick it up, take a look, and then shop, right? So I think this is so a trend which was already prevalent. I think we are going to see much larger adoption of that trend. One of the key things we have observed as a company is the risk appetite for adoption of technology has improved a lot in the last 30 to 45 days, right? So companies which were thinking about, oh, will this technology work? Will blockchain work? Will artificial intelligence work? Now suddenly these conversations have become boardroom conversations, and they are adopting and taking the chance with these technologies much faster than what they used to do historically. So there was a WhatsApp message which was going on which said, who is driving digital transformation, CEO, CIO, CDO, or COVID, right? The answer is probably COVID. So we definitely see a transformation and an accelerated transformation. Retailers were on that journey already, but we see that really increasing. I think Indian retailers were still a little bit slower, but I definitely see a huge acceleration. So I haven't visited a store in the last 2 months, and I'm very happy sitting at home and shopping. I do crave, definitely going out and shopping, especially for things like clothes. But I think the digital physical interaction is going to be very critical for the future.
Interesting. Actually, the other day I was watching sort of a video with Satya and Julie Sweet, who's the global
Yeah,
CEO for,
Accenture. Yeah,
and comment that she's amazed at how fast organizations have adapted to this whole um,
exactly.
working remotely, and the digital transformation journeys have accelerated. So I'm sure you would have been experiencing a similar sort of feedback from your clients all across the globe.
Yeah,
This question from I think, yes, Shivani Hershey, and she wants to know that what would be your advice to companies who've still not embarked on this journey? How might they, or what would be advice to the leadership team, that how might they go about this digital transformation for their organization, because that's something is inevitable.
yeah. Yeah, I think the notion, I think we all have to recognize that our world has changed, right? So I think there's no getting away from that fact, right? Even once the vaccine comes on board, uh, we are going to fear, we are going to see a different world. There are things that we got used to. So when we hosted this astronaut Ron Garan for our show, the reason we wanted to host him is because he had lived for 6 months in the International Space Station, and we wanted to talk to him about how did they really live in this isolation? How does it feel to adjust? But what was very interesting that he said, which was even more interesting, he said adjusting to the station was one. He said, but adjusting back to Earth was actually an even more important aspect of the whole journey, right? Which I thought was extremely thought provoking, right? I think all of us have started, we've sort of got used to where we are today, right? I mean, I keep thinking, when and how will I take my next flight? Something which was, I used to take a flight every Monday morning. I'm like, how the hell am I going to do it in the future, right? So I think businesses have to understand, individuals have to understand that our world has changed, and that is why we are not calling it a new normal. We are calling it a new beginning, right? And we are saying, let's make a fresh start, and this is an opportunity for us to make a fresh start. As I mentioned earlier, our risk appetite has increased. We are willing to take greater chances. Right now, the entire JEE main exams, for college students in India is going to happen in a remote environment, which is done by TCS ION platform. They are completely reimagining that experience, right? How our exams going to be conducted. So, I think this is a great opportunity for business to rethink about, how do they operate in the future, what makes sense for them in the future, and not think about, how do they go back to where they were, right? How can we exactly do what we used to do 3 months back? So to me it feels like a great opportunity, and I think that is how TCS has responded to it with its 25 by 25 vision. We are continuously saying that this is a new beginning, this is a new beginning, right? So I think it's the same philosophy that I think businesses need to think about, and we are happy to help you. We've had fantastic experiences of examples of businesses across the world who are relooking at many aspects of their business. Payments, for example, financial insurance. Rakesh, I mean, we will have love to have a conversation with you. But every business is, transforming, and we are really happy to share all of that learnings. And I think this is a great opportunity for humanity at large.
Absolutely, Rajshri. Lots changing. And yesterday I was talking to a trust economy specialist, Philip Dicona. He was also on our show, and we had a very interesting conversation with him about the benefits of the gifts of crisis. The
Yeah,
crisis brings about a lot of changes and
exactly.
eliminates a lot of things which are not necessary, and we held on to them. And that sort of is transformational, and societies and organizations will experience that. My question to him, Rajri, and I'm going to pose that question to you as well, was that, as a result of fallout of these situations, crises like the one we're experiencing, have seen in the past, while people come back to it, sort of, life resumes after some time. This happened after 9 by 11 when travel was completely shut. Hospitality industry took a nosedive, but over a period of time, things sort of started, returning back to normalcy. What
Yeah,
also happens is, people who have access, organizations who have access to pool of capital, large pool of capital,
yeah,
they are able to weather the storm. They're more resilient, and they
yes,
also sort of more risky decisions, like you said, for the
sure,
betterment of business.
yeah,
See, as a result of this ongoing crisis, also, there would be a case that a lot of businesses who were trying to grow, mid-sized businesses, they will be pushed out, and it will be the big gets bigger, and people who have access, or who are participating in the profit pool more than the others, are the ones who are going to emerge as winners.
yeah.
Or you think another
Um, I'll probably give
situation?
a slightly different twist to it. Of course, having a good balance sheet is always helpful, Rakesh. I'm sure you know that. So that always increases your risk appetite. But I think the way I would respond to it is, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? So, our ability to respond was not just based on the fact that, we are a profitable company. but it was the investments that we had done in the last 3 years in many things, right? So we launched something called we launched another, I would say, vision, which we did not talk as publicly as we are talking this time about being 100% agile. And we launched this whole concept called location independent agile about 3 years back. Our CEO Rajesh launched it when he took over, and that really again taught us a lot of things, right? The entire machine first paradigm again that we launched about 3 years back, again all these investments that we did in making our company nimble, adaptable, resilient, 2 3 years back, have been invaluable for us in the last 2 months. So I would categorize companies not in terms of balance sheets, but I would categorize them in terms of their resilience and adaptiveness, that they have, created in their organizations. A lot of this is technology driven. I personally believe that companies who actually had stronger technology bases have actually performed much better in this environment than companies which relied on old systems, old technologies, old processes. So I think the distinction, maybe in my view, and I think the very personal view, is maybe there. So we've seen mid-sized companies actually do very well because they were more nimble, they were more adaptable, they were more resilient. And we've seen some of the old world legacy companies not performing as well as they, could have in this environment, right? So, for example, a lot of governments have struggled, not in India, but a lot of governments abroad have struggled because they had very very old processes and they had done very little digitization. So I think I would say for us, our investment in our company to make it more adaptable, resilient, has been the singular reason why we could do it and why we can actually get more ambitious with it, right? And to me, probably that's where I would draw the two groups, rather than just say financial health. While that is an important factor, but it's probably not just that.
Fair enough. Fair enough, actually. We have time for a couple of more questions, I hope, Rajshri, with your permission.
Sure, no problem. There was one question which I saw on the queue which talked about one-to-one interaction. I'm not able to track the name of the person, but I want to talk about one thing which we have done, which I thought was, in the realm of how do we connect with our associates. Our HR team actually has set up a, I would say, a call center, an HR help desk, if I can call it that way, where we are calling thousands of employees one to one every day. Again, if you go into LinkedIn, Twitter, you'll see a lot of our employees saying that, I'm a developer and I got a call from HR. That has actually been a very, very interesting thing that we have done. And, big kudos to our HR team who's done it. So we are calling thousands of employees every day. And we talk to them, we ask them how they are. It's not a work conversation at all. We inquire about their health, we inquire about their well-being, what challenges they've had. So I think it's been a very interesting program that we launched. Has gone a very very long way, and especially people. Of course, we've had examples of people, who have been in crisis, family members, suffering and so on. I think that personal touch, how much ever we do digital, I think that personal touch has gone a long way. So I just want to respond. I think I saw a few queries around that as well.
Yes,
Rakesh,
I
over
think that, yes, there was a question from Shaz. I think that's the
yeah.
one. There's another
Yeah.
one from, I get it. I think he's familiar with the, uh, with this SBWS model that you spoke of. And his question is that how shall we prepare for the next phase of SBWS when we will not have the personal connect and relationship that can support us?
No, we will always have that personal connect. I think we've conclusively said that, right? We will go back to office and we will have those coffee conversations and those cafeteria conversations, but maybe not as much as we used to, and maybe differently than we used to. So 450,000 people are not going to stay at home forever. So that's not going to happen for sure.
Yes, that's one big message that we are taking consistently
Yeah,
from Raj. It's pretty clear from what is being shared over here.
sure,
So, Raj, I'll move the topic to brand a bit now.
sure.
The question from Ashish is that how do you, companies in this time really going out and communicating with their customers extensively, and a lot of the communication is around stay safe and it's all of that messages.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but is this the best way to connect, or what would be your advice to brands who are in these times trying to reach out and build equity with their customers?
Rakesh, Rajashree, her
We got
connection has
disconnected.
got lost. Yeah, give me a moment, I'll get her back.
Sure, sure,
I'm sorry,
sure.
just give me one moment. Well, you can chat, and I mean, yes,
Yeah,
I have
sure.
Rajashree back. Yeah,
Can
I
you
have
see me now?
Rajashree.
I got your
Yeah,
question, Rakesh. Got your question on the brand, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think
Yes, good to have you
while
back.
yeah, I think if I probably summarize our strategy from a brand perspective in the last few months, while empathy and concern, I think I read a very good article which talked about how a lot of people are today in grief. Because things that they could do very simply, they're not able to do it, right? So while sympathy and understanding and compassion has been very important, I think there are a few more layers of communication that we have attempted. We when the whole thing was happening, we had to give the confidence. I mean, as a market leader, as a leading company globally, India, we had to give the confidence to people that look, things are fine, right? Things are not falling apart. And our CEO in our LinkedIn post talked about open for business, right? So we said, look, guys, we are open for business. We are not shutting shop, and we're not, hell is not broken loose. I mean, that was a very important part of our messaging strategy, when we started. And I think that really pivoted the conversation, right? So instead of talking about, oh God, things are bad, we started sharing positivity and hope and future, right? As part of the whole messaging strategy. Again, when we started talking about the 25 by 25 and the whole new beginning campaign, again, businesses who can, not every business can sound positive, but we have to definitely give the hope to thousands of people in the country, in the world, our clients, our stakeholders, that look, guys, things are fine. In short term, there are turbulences that we will face, there are challenges that will happen, but it's not like doomsday has come, right? So I think it's a mixture. And also, keep the lights on, right? Continue to do what you're doing. If you're selling, continue to sell. If you're conducting events, continue to conduct the events, right? So keep the business on, keep the opportunity on, keep, get the positivity and optimism as much as we can in this world. So we have taken a strategy which is a mixture of empathy, all of our being a good player for the society. Of course, you've heard about all the charitable stuff that we have done. So we've kept all of that, but we've also, as a market leader and as a leading company in India, made sure that we don't lose our optimism, right? We are humans and we are optimistic. We have to remain optimistic about the future. So I think that is the layering of our brand messaging, which we have attempted to do.
Speaking of empathy and the orientation that you just mentioned, the brands need to have. I missed one question from Arun. He said, while businesses or business models are transforming from product-based model to service-based model,
Yeah,
what are things that organizations can do to ensure that the workforce adopts the service-based model
yeah.
in the changing environment?
Yeah, so at TCS, we have a framework we call the Business 4.0 framework, which is our thought leadership framework. And the thought leadership framework has three important elements, right? So we talk about being purpose driven, we talk about being resilient and adaptable. So these are characteristics that we talk about from an organization standpoint. We have talked enough about resilience and adaptability, right? But purpose is very important, right? I think, again, this pandemic has taught us that companies who are very centered around the purpose have actually done better, right? Or they are in a position to, sort of thrive better in the future. We've seen many of our clients who have, for example, at TCS, for us, customer is like God for us. For us, the ability to use technology to transform businesses and countries is very core to who we are. And that really motivated and brought the company together, right? We knew that the stock exchanges had to work. We knew retailers had to open shops. We knew drug discovery had to continue, right? And that centrality of purpose, what kept us going and is going to keep us going for the future, right? And we've seen this in many cases. We've had companies which have, like companies which have now become from drug manufacturers to healthcare companies, which have gone from, let's say, being an electronics retailer to a technology partner. We've seen multiple examples, and there's a lot of literature we've published on the concept of being purpose driven. And I think I probably can't share a lot now because of time, but I think the concept of, I would not say service led, but I would say purpose focused, right? If I say that I am your financial advisor, then the way you look at your company, the way you look at your associates and employees, goes through a complete 360-degree transformation. So I would say purpose centrality is going to, again, if we talked about putting companies into two buckets, companies which are more purpose centric, and there's a lot of leaders have talked about it as well in the last few weeks. I think is also a very, very important part of how we look at our businesses in the future. I know, for example, in TCS, every associate of ours is so focused on the purpose, and we know how important our work is. We know how important what we do is for the country, for the organization, for the business, for the industry, and that completely brings the organization together. So I'm sure it's true for your organization as well, but I know it's true for a lot of other organizations as well.
Absolutely, Rajshri. I think it's very, very well said. And in fact, that is something that we have experienced firsthand. And my 2 cents on this piece is that, at least in times like these, you get exposed to a lot of options, right? And
Yes,
everything may look very exciting. Should we do this?
yes,
Should we do that?
yes,
And that sort of sometimes can be quite a challenging situation or arduous situation to cope with. But it's amazing how purpose can bring so much clarity to all actions that you want to take. So if you just refer back
exactly.
to core purpose, you can very easily filter out and say, okay, whether this action conforms to the purpose, and then you can decide whether should we be taking this action or not. I think I
Sure.
completely.
No, I agree. I completely agree.
So this comment, you may want to comment on this comment, Rajni, from Harish, who wants to know that we should also consider the ergonomic care of ourselves during this
Yeah, yeah.
phase.
Yeah, we are actually we are now getting to it right now because we have just launched a free ergonomic testing or assessment for our associates in collaboration with some of the other companies in India. So we are partnering with other companies, some of the Tata Group companies themselves, who will. So, for example, we are sitting in one location the whole day, so people are facing health problems. So we are going to do it. And I don't know if you're a TCSer. If you are, you can look out for something on our on Ultimatics. But we are actually launching an ergonomics program for associates, and not just ergonomics, but the whole workplace. What speakers you need, what lights do you need, how do you soundproof your house, what connectivity that you need. So we are. I think in the spirit of solution, we are curating a solution for our associates on how they can create better home offices and help us. So yeah, we are going to do it, and you can look out for something within the next 1 week.
Brilliant, Rajni. So it brings me to the last question for the show, Rajni. What would be your advice to our audience who are possibly early in their career or at mid-level in their career journey, who have
Yeah.
aspirations to grow and head the function? So what would be your advice to our audience? How should they go about this, especially in these times?
So it's very interesting. Whenever I get asked that question, there's somehow this notion that we are very successful, but I feel that we are still in the learning journey. And after I get off this call, probably solve some fires here and there. But I think in this today's world, I would say two, three things are very important. One is the ability to adopt change. I feel you know I mean, I was, for example, if I take my personal example, I was running retail practice 3 months back, and now I'm in a completely different role. So I think adoption of change, being open to change, I think is very critical. I think it has to be a very core skill, if I can put it that way. The second question I think is the second skill which is very important is I think everybody should learn technology. Doesn't really matter who you are and which field that you are in. everybody should learn technology, right? I encourage everybody, whether you are, I mean, I'm not a computer scientist or I'm not a computer engineer, but I encourage everybody to learn technology. I say go out there and do courses, on artificial intelligence and blockchain. And, I hear our prime minister sometimes use all these very effectively. Everybody should learn technology. So, I know there are a lot of people in this probably who are not technologists, and you think it's not for me, it's for the IT team. But being open to change and adopting technology in your personal life and learning about how technology works, how does a piece of code works, I feel these two things are very important for the future.
Thank you very much, Rajashree. That brings us to the end of the show. But before I let you off, I need to pick up two lucky questions with your permission.
Sure.
So the first question that I would like to pick is from Deepika, and she asked the question on the culture. How do you maintain culture in a new reality that we are all speaking about? So Deepika, congratulations. Thank you
Congrats to
for
you,
asking
Deepika.
us this. Please do share your email ID with us so we can reach out to you and ship you the gift voucher. And the next question is from, okay, just give me a second. From Sayan Datta. His question was around what would be the result of this shift, when people in tier 2 and 3 cities are able to work from home. So will that result into some compensation
Yeah,
adjustment?
great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sayan. Congratulations. Please do share your email ID with us so we can ship the voucher to you. And with that, I would like to thank Rajashree once again. Rajashree, it was just amazing having you on this show. Very useful and very insightful perspective today. Very interesting presentation
Thank you.
that gives not only a view into what TCS is and what makes this organization such a great organization, but also it was a hugely learnful session for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming,
Thanks,
Rajashree.
Rajesh. Thanks a lot, Rakesh. Thanks to Ashish, very patiently setting the whole thing up. Thanks
Yes,
to Ruchira, who invited me in the first place. So, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, and I think we do some work for Future Generali as well. So, I look
yes.
forward to keeping our professional connect. And thanks to everybody who's joined today. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, folks. So before we wrap up today's session, uh, some gratitude for our community support partner who've been spreading our message across the board to large number of people. With their help, this community has grown, and we've got some very encouraging feedback. So thank you very much, Resulticks, Adgully, Netcore, and Paul Reiter for partnering with us on Masters Speak. Our next session is on next Friday. We've got another very interesting speaker joining us. So please do tune in next Friday to hear Jaspreet Bindra. Uh, I've read his book very recently, and I'm sure all of you who are in the domain of technology, who like digital, who love the concept, who love the subject of digital and technology, do not miss this session. Look forward to seeing all of you all again. Thank you very much for joining us today. Friday to hear Jaspreet Bindra.